that knows you can do all things. I've learned that I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. Well, what do you mean, Paul? You've learned to be content. Well, the author, Dr. Ellen Kenner, says it like this. She says, happiness is not based upon my circumstance. She says, happiness is based upon the fact that I'm in love with life. She says, my happiness is not based upon what I'm going through, but based upon the fact that I'm in love with life. How many of you just love living, right? I just love being alive today. When you say one day at a time, every day that I wake, brand new mercies. I'm in love with life. That's God's gift to me. He's given me another day. And every day that he gives me is a brand new day to praise the name of God. Pursuit of happiness. And so Paul says, he says, now that I'm happy, I don't want to leave it there because you have to be careful that you don't become stingy. Once you get your happiness, it's not enough. But Paul says, I want to go back to where it all began. Well, what do you mean? A lot of times we end up forgetting where we came from. Once I've gotten to where I want to be, we have a way of getting spiritual amnesia and forgetting who brought you over and brought you through and made a way out of nowhere. He says, I've got to go back. Mama, I've got to go back and tell you I'll never forget what you've done for me. He says, I've got to make sure that you know, nevertheless. Isn't it interesting that we can always be able to start it with, I'm never the less. That's something that he was taught. I'm never the less. I might not be what you are, but I'm never never the less. He says, because the reason I can say I'm nevertheless is because you have shared with me in my affliction. You've got to be able to tell somebody that was there when you were going through. I remember when you shared with me when I was down. Because now that I'm up, it's easy to look down on my situation. He says, but now I'm nevertheless, because you've shared with me in my afflictions. And it says, and you know that when I first started preaching the gospel, nobody else wanted to do anything with me. And you've got to be careful once you get to be so big that you forget when you were a nobody. When you forget the people that instilled some values in you and told you that you would be somebody. Is there anybody in here that can say, Mama told me I was going to be somebody? Whenever I needed somebody to give me an encouraging word, you were there. He says, I understand that you allowed me to go through my afflictions, but you went through it with me. He says, and then when I didn't have anybody else, you were the only one that was there. But not only that, but then you gave to me. He says, you gave to me not once, but twice. He says, you kept on giving to me. And listen, most times when we do things for people, if we do it the first time and they don't say thank you, chances are we won't do it again. He says, but even in the midst of my ingratitude, he says, you still kept on blessing me. You still kept on giving to me. He says, so I want to take time out to thank you. Is there anybody that can take time out right now and just tell somebody, thank you? I know it doesn't seem popular these days, but you ought to take time right now and just say, thank you. I know you didn't have a whole lot of money to give me, but thank you. We didn't have the finest clothes, but we had clothes. So thank you. Is there anybody that can help me shout? Well, maybe nobody did anything for you. You can sit there looking cute if you want to, but there's some people that blessed me in my time of need. There's some people that made a way for me, and I've still got to take time out and say, thank you. Says, now I don't want you to get it twisted. He says, I'm not looking for a handout. He says, I'm not buttering you up, because usually when people say thank you and start bringing up old times, they're leading up to another question. He says, but I don't want anything from me. He says, but I'm looking for a gift that increases you. Is there anybody in here that can say, once I get my happiness, my will is for somebody else to have that same happiness? Says, I don't want to do anything for me. He says, but since I have gained this happiness, now I want you who blessed me to be happy. Isn't it funny that mothers can give till it hurts, and sometimes to spare their own happiness, they'll do whatever it takes to make sure their children are happy? So for all the mothers, this is for you. Now that you've given your children happiness, my desire, my prayer is now you deserve the same happiness. I know you tried to do it for your children, but for all that you do, this thanks is for you. He says, I want you to be happy. He says, and the reason why I can say this is because now I have it all. He says, now I have received everything in full. I have an abundance. I have an ample supply. He says, I have it all. Well, what does having it all mean? Well, the American dream is found in the Declaration of Independence. And it says that you have the right to life, to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what the Declaration declares, is that you have the right to life, to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But before you start jumping up and down, it says you have the right to the pursuit of happiness. Well, what do you mean? Well, in the Supreme Court case, Loving versus Virginia, it was ruled that you have the right to the pursuit of happiness, but you don't have the right to happiness. So therefore, you can't claim that you've been wronged just because you're unhappy. I wish somebody could hear that in here. You can't claim that you've been mistreated because you're unhappy. You can't claim that you've been done wrong because you're sitting here unhappy. And be careful, because when people are unhappy, their ulterior motive, since they can't claim happiness, is to take your happiness. I wish I had some people in